The jungle breathes in the darkness. Somewhere deep in the Quang Nam province of South Vietnam, under the dense canopy where sunlight dies before reaching the earth, a Marine Corps sniper lies motionless on wet ground. It is May 1967, and Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Norman Hathcock II has been in this position for 3 days. The heat presses down like a living thing. Mosquitoes swarm his face, his neck, his hands, but he does not move. Through his scope, across a distance that seems impossible, he watches a small clearing where a single figure appears each morning at dawn. The target is a North Vietnamese army general, a man whose decisions send hundreds of soldiers south along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Thank you for listening to this inspiring story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below telling us which city you're listening from. Intelligence from the Combined Action Program has confirmed his location in a fortified compound beyond the village of An Hoa. The shot, if Hathcock attempts it, will be over 2,000 meters. Beyond the effective range of any rifle in the American arsenal. Beyond what any sniper in recorded history has proven possible in combat. His spotter, Corporal John Roland Burke, whispers that the distance makes it suicide to even try. The bullet will drop like a stone. The wind in 3 layers of jungle canopy cannot be calculated. But Hathcock has seen the general twice now through his scope. And he knows that if this man lives another week, more Americans will die in ambushes along Route 9. More Marines from the 1st Battalion, 26th Regiment will come home in body bags. Or not come home at all. Hathcock's finger rests near the trigger of his Winchester Model 70 rifle. A weapon he has carried through every mission since arriving at Hill 55 in September 1966. The moral weight of the decision presses into his chest like the mud beneath him. To take this shot means revealing his position. It means bringing down enemy fire on himself and Burke. It means risking capture or death in hostile territory, where the Viet Cong offer bounties for American snipers, especially for the one they call White Feather, because of the plume Hathcock wears in his bush hat as a mark of defiance. But not taking the shot means allowing a commander to live who will orchestrate the deaths of men Hathcock has eaten with, trained with, men whose faces he knows. He adjusts his breathing, feeling the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The scope shows a figure moving towards the clearing again. Dawn is breaking through the heavy clouds. This is the moment. But to understand how Carlos Hathcock arrived at this impossible choice in the jungle darkness of Quang Nam, we need to go back to the beginning, to the boy who grew up in the hills of Arkansas and dreamed of being the greatest marksman America had ever known. Carlos Hathcock was born on May 20th, 1942, in Little Rock, Arkansas. In a time when America was gearing up for a war most people did not yet understand. His father, Carlos Norman Hathcock, was a welder who struggled with alcoholism and left the family when the boy was young. His mother, Agnes, worked long hours to keep food on the table. Young Carlos was raised mostly by his grandmother in Gaia Springs, a rural area where hunting was not sport, but survival. He learned to shoot with a borrowed rifle in the woods behind his grandmother's house, bringing home rabbits and squirrels for dinner before he turned 10. The rifle became an extension of his body, something he understood better than books or people. In school, he was quiet, unremarkable, except on the rare occasions when conversation turned to shooting. By the time he was 17, Hathcock had won multiple shooting competitions across Arkansas and knew that his future lay with the rifle. In 1959, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, telling the recruiter in Little Rock that he wanted to be the best shot the Marines had ever seen. The recruiter, a staff sergeant named William Dennison, looked at the thin, soft-spoken teenager and sent him to recruit training at Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. Hathcock excelled immediately. At the rifle range, his scores broke depot records. His drill instructors noticed something unusual about him, a stillness that seemed inhuman, an ability to slow his breathing and heart rate until the rifle became perfectly stable. In 1961, he won the Wimbledon Cup at Camp Perry, Ohio, a prestigious long-range shooting competition that brought together the best marksmen in the country. He was 19 years old, and already his name was circulating among Marine Corps shooting coaches and competitive shooters who understood that Hathcock possessed a rare gift. But competitive shooting and combat are different universes, and Hathcock would not understand the difference until September 1966, when the Marine Corps sent him to Vietnam as a military policeman assigned to the Marine Corps Air Facility at Chu Lai. The war in Vietnam had escalated dramatically after the Gulf of Tonkin incident in August 1964. By 1966, over 300,000 American troops were in country, fighting an enemy that refused to engage in conventional battles, and instead used ambush, booby traps, and the jungle itself as a weapon. The North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong operated with intimate knowledge of the terrain, moving through tunnel systems and trails that American forces struggled to locate or control. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, a network of paths running from North Vietnam through Laos and Cambodia into South Vietnam, supplied communist forces with weapons, ammunition, and reinforcements despite constant American bombing. The war was becoming a grinding stalemate, and American casualties were mounting. Marine Corps commanders in Ah Corps, the northernmost military region of South Vietnam, were desperately seeking ways to disrupt enemy operations. One solution was the development of sniper programs. Captain Edward James Land, a former competitive shooter who had worked with Hathcock at Camp Perry, arrived in Vietnam in 1966 with orders to establish the first formal Marine Corps sniper school. Land knew that trained snipers could provide intelligence, eliminate high-value targets, and create psychological pressure on enemy forces. He also knew that he needed instructors who could survive in the jungle and teach others to do the same. When Land learned that Carlos Hathcock was in country, working as a military policeman at Chu Lai, he requested his transfer immediately. Hathcock arrived at Hill 55, a fire base near Da Nang, in late 1966 and began training Marines in the art of precision shooting under combat conditions. But Land also sent him into the field, knowing that Hathcock's skills could save American lives. The mission started small. Hathcock would move into the jungle with a spotter, usually a young Marine trained in land navigation and radio communication, and they would set up observation posts to gather intelligence on enemy movements. But intelligence gathering quickly turned lethal. Hathcock began targeting Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army officers, mortar teams, and sentries who guarded supply routes. His success rate was extraordinary. By early 1967, Hathcock had over 50 confirmed kills, each one verified by a witness or physical evidence. The North Vietnamese Army began to take notice. Rewards were offered for the capture or killing of American snipers, and Hathcock became a particular target of interest. He wore a white feather in his bush hat, a tradition he had adopted from a story he had read about an old Western gunfighter. The feather was visible from a distance, an act of psychological warfare that told the enemy he was not afraid. The Viet Cong began calling him White Feather and increased the bounty on his head to $30,000, an enormous sum that reflected both respect and fear. Hathcock's commanding officer, Major Willis Elbert Bain, warned him to remove the feather. Hathcock refused. He believed that fear was a weapon as powerful as a bullet, and if the enemy was afraid of him, they would make mistakes. In March 1967, Hathcock received intelligence about a North Vietnamese Army general operating in Quang Nam Province. The general, whose name was never fully confirmed by American intelligence, but was believed to be Senior Colonel Nguyen Dak Thang, was coordinating operations along the western approaches to Da Nang. He was responsible for planning ambushes against American convoys on Route 9 and for directing mortar attacks on Hill 55 and other American positions. Eliminating him would disrupt enemy operations for weeks, possibly months, but the general was careful. He moved frequently, used body doubles, and rarely exposed himself in open terrain. When Captain Land briefed Hathcock on the mission, he made it clear that this was voluntary. The target was located beyond the range of any confirmed sniper kill in history. The world record for a sniper kill at the time was held by a Soviet sniper from World War II, and even that shot had been under 1,500 meters. Land estimated that Hathcock would need to make a shot of at least 2,500 meters, possibly more, across jungle terrain with unpredictable wind and heat distortion. Hathcock listened to the briefing, asked a few technical questions about the terrain and the target's habits, and then said he would go. His spotter, Corporal John Rowland Burke, a 21-year-old from Ohio who had been working with Hathcock for 4 months, volunteered to accompany him. On May 18, 1967, Hathcock and Burke left Hill 55 before dawn, moving west into the jungle towards the suspected location of the general's compound. The journey took 2 days. They moved slowly, avoiding trails and known enemy positions, sleeping in short shifts, eating cold rations, and communicating only in whispers or hand signals. The jungle in Quang was a maze of vines, thorns, and ancient trees that blocked the sky. The heat was suffocating, and the humidity turned their uniforms into wet rags. They crossed streams swollen from recent rains, waded through rice paddies, and climbed ridges covered in elephant grass. On the second day, they reached a hillside overlooking a valley where intelligence had placed the general's compound. Through binoculars, Hathcock could see a cluster of buildings hidden beneath camouflage netting. There were guards, at least a dozen, moving in patrols around the perimeter. But beyond the compound, across a wide expanse of open ground and another stretch of jungle, there was a small clearing. Intelligence reports suggested the general used this clearing as a helicopter landing zone. If he was still in the area, he would appear there at dawn. Hathcock and Burke found a position on the hillside, dug in, and waited. The first night passed without event. The second day, they saw movement near the compound, but no one approached the clearing. On the third day, May 22nd, 1967, just after sunrise, a figure appeared in the clearing. Through his scope, Hathcock could see an officer in a crisp uniform, flanked by 2 guards. The man carried himself with authority. Burke used the rangefinder and confirmed the distance. 2,500 meters. 2,500 meters. 1.5 miles. The bullet would travel for nearly 3 seconds. It would drop over 400 feet from the muzzle to the target. Wind, heat waves, humidity, and even the rotation of the earth would affect its path. Hathcock adjusted his scope, calculating windage and elevation by instinct and experience more than mathematics. He chambered a round, a .30-06 Springfield cartridge, and settled into his shooting position. Burke watched through binoculars, ready to call the shot. Hathcock breathed in, breathed out, let half the breath go, and felt his heartbeat slow. The crosshairs settled on the figure in the clearing. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, a sound that echoed across the valley, and immediately gave away their position. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. The figure in the clearing stood motionless, unaware. Then, impossibly, the man collapsed. Burke saw it through the binoculars and whispered, "Hit!" Enemy soldiers in the compound began shouting. Gunfire erupted from the tree line. Hathcock and Burke were already moving, scrambling down the hillside, knowing that within minutes the jungle would be swarming with North Vietnamese soldiers hunting for them. They ran, crashing through undergrowth, sliding down muddy slopes, their lungs burning, their legs shaking. Behind them, they could hear voices, the sound of men crashing through the jungle in pursuit. They moved east toward Hill 55, but the distance was over 10 kilometers, and the jungle was hostile. Burke twisted his ankle crossing a stream and could barely walk. Hathcock half-carried him, moving as fast as he could, knowing that if they were caught, the Viet Cong would not take them prisoner. The bounty on his head guaranteed a brutal death. They moved through the night, navigating by compass and stars, until finally, near dawn on May 23rd, they stumbled into an American patrol from the 5th Marine Regiment near the village of Dien Bon. The patrol radioed for extraction, and a helicopter brought them back to Hill 55. When Hathcock filed his after-action report with Captain Land, he described the shot in clinical terms: range, wind conditions, bullet drop, result. Land looked at him and said, "You just made the longest confirmed kill in the history of warfare." Hathcock shrugged and said he was just doing his job. But the shot changed everything. Word spread through the Marine Corps, then through the entire military. Hathcock became a legend, the sniper who had done the impossible, and the legend brought new dangers with it. The North Vietnamese army did not forget. Within days of the shot in Quang Nam province, enemy radio intercepts revealed increased chatter about the white feather sniper. The bounty on Hathcock's head rose to $40,000, and intelligence reports suggested that specialized counter-sniper units were being deployed specifically to hunt him. Captain Land ordered Hathcock to stop wearing the white feather, but Hathcock refused again. He believed that removing it would signal fear, and fear was the one thing he could not afford to show. Throughout June and July 1967, Hathcock continued his missions, moving deeper into enemy territory, targeting officers, weapons specialists, and mortar crews. Each mission brought him closer to death. On one patrol near the Elephant Valley in late June, Hathcock and his spotter, Lance Corporal Jerry Dean Stiers from Tennessee, were ambushed by a Viet Cong squad. They fought their way out, killing 3 enemy soldiers at close range, but Stiers took a bullet through the shoulder. Hathcock carried him 2 kilometers to an evacuation point, exposed to sniper fire the entire way. Stiers survived but was sent home. The psychological weight of the missions began to show. Hathcock slept poorly, haunted by faces he had seen through his scope in the seconds before pulling the trigger. He wrote letters to his wife, Jo, back in New Bern, North Carolina, but he could not tell her what he was doing or what it was costing him. In one letter dated July 15, 1967, he wrote only that he missed her and their son, Carlos III, and that he hoped to be home by Christmas. He did not tell her about the nightmares or the way his hands shook when he was not on a mission. In September 1967, Hathcock was assigned a mission that would become as infamous as the long-range shot in May. Intelligence reported that a female Viet Cong sniper, known to American forces as Apache, was operating in the hill country west of Hill 55. Apache was not her real name. Military intelligence believed she was a cadre member of the People's Liberation Armed Forces, possibly trained in North Vietnam or China, but her identity was never confirmed. What was confirmed were her methods. Apache specialized in torturing captured American soldiers before killing them. Reports from South Vietnamese villagers and from American patrols who had found the bodies described mutilations, prolonged suffering, and a cruelty that seemed designed to terrorize. Apache had killed at least a dozen Americans, and the Marine Corps wanted her stopped. Hathcock volunteered for the mission, taking with him a new spotter, Private First Class Donald Raymond Ranke from Wisconsin. They moved into the hill country in early September, tracking rumors and reports, searching for a ghost. For 5 days, they found nothing. Then, on September 8th, while setting up an observation post on a ridgeline, Hathcock saw movement in the jungle below. Through his scope, he saw a figure moving carefully through the undergrowth, carrying a rifle. The figure wore black clothing and a conical hat. Hathcock watched, waiting to confirm the target. The figure stopped, raised the rifle, and scanned the ridgeline through a scope. In that instant, Hathcock understood that he was looking at another sniper, and that the sniper was looking for him. He fired before the other rifle aligned. The bullet struck the enemy sniper through the scope, entering the eye and killing instantly. When Hathcock and Ranke reached the body, they confirmed it was a woman, young, no more than 25, with a Soviet-made Mosin Nagant rifle and a diary that contained sketches of tortured prisoners. Hathcock felt no satisfaction, only a cold relief that she would not kill anyone else. He reported the kill to Captain Land, and the mission was classified. The official record listed only enemy sniper eliminated. Hathcock never spoke about it publicly during his lifetime, but the story circulated among Marines, and Apache became part of the legend that surrounded him. By late 1967, Hathcock had 93 confirmed kills, the highest count of any American sniper in Vietnam, but confirmed kills were only a fraction of the true number. Marine Corps doctrine required a witness or physical evidence for confirmation, and many of Hathcock's kills occurred at such long range that confirmation was impossible. Hathcock himself estimated his true total was over 300, but he refused to speculate publicly. He told a reporter from Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper, that he did not keep count, that every kill represented a human life, and that he thought about that every single day. The reporter, a sergeant named Michael Kelly, wrote a profile of Hathcock that appeared in the November 1967 edition, describing him as a quiet professional who carries the weight of war in his eyes. The profile reached military circles in Washington, and senior officers began discussing how to use Hathcock's expertise. Major General Herman Nickerson Jr., commanding general of the 1st Marine Division, wanted Hathcock to train an entire battalion of snipers. But Captain Land argued that Hathcock's value was in the field, not behind a desk. The debate continued through the winter of 1967, but Hathcock remained at Hill 55, teaching new snipers and conducting missions when intelligence provided targets worth the risk. In February 1968, the war changed. The Tet Offensive, a coordinated attack by North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces across South Vietnam, shattered the illusion that America was winning. Cities that had been considered safe, including Saigon and Hue, came under direct assault. The ancient imperial capital of Hue fell to communist forces on January 31st, and the battle to retake it lasted 26 days, killing thousands of civilians and leaving much of the city in ruins. Hill 55 came under sustained mortar and rocket attack. Hathcock and other snipers were pulled from offensive missions and assigned to defensive positions, protecting the perimeter against sappers and infantry assaults. The intensity of the fighting was unlike anything Hathcock had experienced. Waves of North Vietnamese soldiers attacked the wire, and the night was filled with explosions, tracer fire, and screams. Hathcock manned a defensive position for 72 hours straight, sleeping in 15-minute intervals, his rifle always in his hands. When the offensive finally broke in early March, Hill 55 had held, but the cost was heavy. Over 40 Marines from the base were dead, and more than 100 were wounded. Hathcock emerged from the battle exhausted, his hearing damaged from explosions, his body running on adrenaline and coffee. Captain Land ordered him to take leave, but Hathcock refused. He knew that the Marines needed every experienced sniper they had. In September 1969, Hathcock's war ended in fire. He was riding in an LVT-P-5 amphibious assault vehicle near the village of An Hoa, returning from a mission with a 6-man team, when the vehicle struck a landmine. The explosion tore through the vehicle's belly, igniting fuel and ammunition. The Marines inside were thrown against the walls, and flames engulfed the interior. Hathcock, riding near the rear, was blown clear of the initial blast, but his uniform was soaked in fuel and caught fire. He could hear men screaming inside the burning vehicle. Despite his own injuries, despite the flames consuming his body, Hathcock climbed back into the inferno and began pulling Marines out. He dragged out Private First Class Ralph Schaefer from Alabama. He pulled out Lance Corporal Victor Martinez from Texas. He went back a third time, a fourth, a fifth, until 7 men were clear of the vehicle. By then, his skin was burned across more than 40% of his body. His hands were blackened, and his face was unrecognizable. He collapsed on the ground, unconscious, and was evacuated by helicopter to the Naval Support Activity Hospital in Da Nang. The doctors, led by Commander Paul Henderson, gave him a 20% chance of survival. He spent 2 months in the burn unit, undergoing skin grafts and debridement procedures that left him screaming in pain, despite morphine. The Marine Corps awarded him the Silver Star for his actions, presented by Major General Ormond Simpson in a bedside ceremony at the hospital in November 1969. Hathcock could barely speak, his voice damaged by smoke inhalation, but he managed to ask about the men he had pulled from the vehicle. 6 had survived. 1, Lance Corporal Daniel Curtis from Georgia, had died from his burns 3 days after the explosion. Hathcock carried that death for the rest of his life. He was evacuated to the United States in December 1969, first to the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia, then to the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia, for further treatment and rehabilitation. The burns had destroyed nerves and muscle tissue. He could not grip a rifle properly. His hands shook. He walked with a cane. The Marine Corps Medical Board determined that he was no longer fit for combat duty. In March 1970, after 11 years of service, Gunnery Sergeant Carlos Hathcock was assigned to the Weapons Training Battalion at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia, where he would spend the next 9 years teaching marksmanship and sniper tactics to new generations of Marines. The assignment was meant to be a kindness, a way to keep a legend in the Corps. But for Hathcock, it felt like exile. He was 30 years old, broken in body, and the only life he had ever known was over. He moved his family to a small house near Quantico, and he tried to adjust to a world without war. But the war had not left him. He suffered from chronic pain, from nightmares, from what would later be diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder, though in 1970 that term was not widely used or understood. He drank too much. He withdrew from his wife and son. He spent hours in his garage, cleaning rifles that no longer needed cleaning, trying to find the stillness he had once known in the jungle. The students at Quantico revered him. Young Marines would come to his classes having heard the stories, and they would sit in silence as Hathcock demonstrated shooting positions or explained wind reading. He was a patient teacher, demanding but fair, and he took pride in knowing that the skills he taught would keep Marines alive in combat. He developed training programs that became standard across the Marine Corps sniper community. He mentored snipers who would later serve in Grenada, Panama, and the Persian Gulf. One of his students, Staff Sergeant Chuck Mahiney from Oregon, would go on to exceed Hathcock's confirmed kill count in Vietnam, with 103 confirmed kills. When Mahiney's record was publicized in the 1990s, Hathcock was the first to congratulate him, telling a reporter that he was proud to have taught such a fine Marine. Hathcock never spoke about his own record with pride, only with a quiet acknowledgement that he had done what was necessary. In interviews conducted in the 1980s by military historians and journalists, including Roy Chandler and Norman Chandler, who co-authored a biography titled Marine Sniper, Hathcock described his missions in factual terms, without embellishment or glorification. He said that every person he killed had been an enemy combatant who would have killed Americans. He said that he believed in the mission and in protecting his fellow Marines. But he also said that war was not glorious, that it left scars that never healed, and that he wished no one ever had to do what he had done. In 1975, Hathcock was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a degenerative disease that attacks the nervous system. The doctors told him it was likely unrelated to his service, but Hathcock believed the burns and the stress of combat had triggered the disease. His condition deteriorated over the next decade. By 1979, he could no longer teach full-time, and the Marine Corps medically retired him with the rank of gunnery sergeant. He was 40 years old. He spent his final years in Virginia Beach, Virginia, largely confined to a wheelchair, cared for by his wife Jo, who never left his side despite the difficult years of his readjustment to civilian life. He attended sniper reunions when his health allowed, and he answered letters from young Marines who wrote to him asking for advice. He told them to train hard, to respect the rifle, to remember that every shot had consequences, and to take care of each other. In 1996, the Marine Corps named the sniper range at Marine Corps Base Quantico the Carlos Hathcock Range in his honor. Hathcock attended the dedication ceremony in a wheelchair, surrounded by Marines who had served with him or learned from him. He said very little during the ceremony, but when asked what he wanted young snipers to remember, he said, "Remember that you're taking a human life. Don't ever forget that." Carlos Norman Hathcock II died on February 22, 1999, at the age of 56 in Virginia Beach. His funeral was held at Arlington National Cemetery on March 9, 1999, with full military honors. Marines from every sniper platoon in the Corps attended. His casket was draped with the American flag, and a firing party from Marine Barracks, Washington, delivered a 3-volley salute. His wife, Jo, his son, Carlos III, and his grandchildren stood beside the grave as the bugler played taps. The Marine Corps Commandant at the time, General Charles Krulak, issued a statement saying that Hathcock had set the standard for Marine Corps snipers, and that his legacy would endure as long as Marines carried rifles. In the years since his death, Hathcock's record has been studied, analyzed, and sometimes debated, but never diminished. The shot at 2,500 meters remained the longest confirmed sniper kill in history until 2002, when a Canadian sniper in Afghanistan exceeded it. But Hathcock's shot was made with iron sights and a standard hunting rifle in jungle conditions, factors that make it, in the opinion of many military historians and snipers, the most difficult shot ever recorded in combat. His grave at Arlington is marked with a simple headstone that lists his name, rank, dates of service, and decorations. There is no mention of confirmed kills, no record of the white feather, no summary of the missions that made him a legend. Just a name, a life, a service rendered. Visitors still leave white feathers at the base of the stone, a quiet tribute from those who understand what he did and what it cost him. The feather he wore in Vietnam is preserved at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Triangle, Virginia, displayed in a glass case alongside his rifle, and a photograph of him as a young sergeant, his face calm, his eyes watching something far beyond the camera. The museum placard describes him as the greatest sniper in Marine Corps history, but it also notes that Hathcock himself rejected that title. He said he was simply a Marine who did his job, who tried to protect his brothers, and who lived with the consequences of every decision he made in the jungle. The story of Carlos Hathcock is not a story about heroism in the traditional sense. It is a story about skill and duty, about the terrible clarity that comes when survival depends on precision. and about the price that human beings pay when they are asked to kill in the name of protecting others. Hathcock understood that price better than most, and he carried it without complaint, without self-pity, and without ever forgetting that the figures in his scope were human beings with lives as real as his own. What his story shows, across the decades and the distance, is that courage in war is not the absence of fear or doubt, but the willingness to act despite them, and to live with the weight of those actions long after the war is ended.